we're going to talk all about the problems associated with mining. And I'm going to focus mostly on coal, but this applies to other types of mines as well. When I first saw these pictures, I actually thought they were fake. I thought somebody was trying to fool me and, photoshopped or misinformation. These are real. I went and researched it and made sure everything was legit. So this is a mine in Utah. And one of the biggest problems we have anytime we remove materials from the earth, this would apply to deforestation, which we talked about first semester. When you remove things from the surface, you open it up to erosion. And so that's a giant problem with mines as well. And here you can see erosion has led to the collapse of one side of this open pit mine. Luckily, this mine was pretty much shut down. They had extracted most of the ore, and so they had a very small crew that had been working there, and nobody was hurt in this collapse that occurred. So at least there's a positive there. This happened in 2013. I thought this was a good chance to just real quick review the types of mining that we introduced on Friday. So here you see mountaintop removal, which is one of the worst. The real issue here is that it's sloped. So when you have erosion, all of the toxic things that come out of mines go down into the valleys. And so mountaintop removal is particularly problematic when it comes to erosion. Strip mines, that's where you take away one layer at a time. And then of course, open pit, we just saw how those can erode and collapse. And you definitely don't want erosion when you're talking about subsurface, because that means it's going to collapse underground. If you have anybody in there, they're going to be at major risk. Okay, so mining, if we go back historically, it really helped build this country. They were putting their lives on the line every day. We didn't have all the technology and engineering that we do now. And so they would always be at risk of collapse, opening up a gas pocket that accidentally ignites and explodes. They were doing a lot of mining by hand. And so pickaxes would stir up all kinds of dust, and they were breathing all that in. They weren't wearing masks. And so they would get what's called black lung disease, where they're literally poisoning their lungs with coal dust. A lot of these miners didn't make it past 40, 50 years old. But there was pride in their work. These guys literally were building America, all the coal to power all of our industry. In World War II, we were able to make the best quality steel for our Navy. We had the best battleships, the best equipment, because we had tons of coal and we could fire up the hottest steel furnaces. Now, as technology improved, mines looked to improve their profit margins, and they started to use machinery. They found ways to take machines down. They would literally assemble them in the mine because they couldn't fit this stuff down the elevators while it was all put together. And that started to remove workers from the mines. That increased safety, but it decreased people making a living wage. And you can see these machines are very awesome in terms of power, and they're able to do way more mining than individual humans ever could. So less workers as mines became more mechanized, but obviously you've got better safety. They also realized that after the ore was removed, what do they do with all this machinery? Do they take it apart and bring it back up and use it in a different area? They discovered that in most cases, that would require labor, union wages. So it was cheaper to just leave it down there. So there are abandoned mines all over the country that have giant pieces of machines like this that are just essentially decomposing as they would in a landfill. However, remember, some of this stuff could be a century old. Now, the reason these mines are abandoned is because prior to the 1970s, you could do that. If your mine wasn't making any money or had removed all the ore, all you had to do was hang up a sign that said closed, and you're out of there. You didn't have to clean anything up, didn't have to build a fence, just you're done. It's natural selection, I guess. If somebody decides to wander in there and hurt themselves, not your problem. Remember that with coal, we're removing a fuel, So obviously, if your coal seam catches fire, it's supposed to burn. How in the world are you supposed to put that out? Remember, the coal seam could be buried, surrounded completely by rock. So fire is a huge problem with any type of coal mining, especially. There's no better example of this than a former town in Pennsylvania called Centralia. In 1962, the coal mine here caught on fire and it quickly spread out of control. Once again, this is before the 70s, so they didn't really have to care about it that much. And what the miners decided was, well, we'll just close the mine and not worry about it. So they did. They bulldozed this road. You can see they just put a big mound of dirt across the road, and that was it. I'm here to tell you that almost 60 years later, Centralia is still burning. That fire's been burning for over half a century. The people who lived nearby, after a year or two in the 60s, they had to leave because the air quality was filled with sulfuric acid, carbon monoxide, all those gases that you get when you burn coal. We mine just about anything. There's plenty of sulfur that's locked into rocks and the soil. And so as that sulfur gets released, it gets into our groundwater, and you're going to see the water start to turn orangish, reddish colors. It's particularly harmful to kids. By the time you're 8 or 9, your body's got most of the neurological defenses that it needs. But anybody before that, when they get exposed to acid mine drainage, mercury, lead, that can cause brain development issues. Here you see some terrible cases around the country where people lived nearby mines, and there are all kinds of cancer spikes and neurological problems because they didn't know the water was being polluted. Before the 1970s, they could dump whatever they wanted into local rivers, lakes, and people got sick. And they eventually realized it was the mines. Here you can see these mine employees admitted for 8 years they were dumping the waste from a mine into the local groundwater. Another big theme we're going to see over the next 2 weeks here or so is that we are designed as a industrial society. All of our infrastructure is geared toward coal and oil. So yeah, we would love to switch to wind and solar and hydrogen, but to do that, we have to build a brand new system to handle that and distribute it all. We designed everything to be this other system. And so that's one of the barriers we face, the cost. So in a mine, rarely do we use the product right where we mine it. We have to be able to get it somewhere. And so infrastructure is another cost to people who operate mines. This is Chattanooga, Tennessee, right in the heart of coal country, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, those states. And just as far as the eye can see, car after car loaded down with coal. So there are accidents, just like we have oil spills. If we move coal on a barge, here you can see it once again spilling into their local drinking water, 1 million people in Pittsburgh. We can have train cars that derail and spilled all kinds of stuff. Definitely big accidents that happen in the transportation of our ores. Coal goes through some processing, but this applies to all other things as well. For example, in the picture you're looking at gold. When they get gold, they melt it down. And the reason they do that is there's going to be small impurities in the gold. And because gold is so dense, when it's melted, it separates out. That's called smelting. The gold sinks to the bottom and the impurities float to the top. And that's what you see over here on the right. That gross stuff on top, they're able to just chip it right off. That stuff's called slag. And with gold, they actually remelt the slag just to make sure they didn't miss any gold. That's how valuable it is. But that's how we get pretty gold bars with almost zero impurities in them. Now, what do we do with the slag? Well, we just throw it outside, right? It's just like trash. So in a mine, a lot of this stuff is acidic or toxic, and they have created what are called tailings ponds. Now, a lot of these are properly designed and they have leak-proof liners so that the toxins don't get in the water. But the problem is that a lot of these tailings ponds are uncovered. So especially in hurricane-prone areas, when a big storm rolls through, it picks up these tailings and then it spits them all out all over the place. You get some, you get some, you get some. The big byproduct of burning coal, just like anything that you burn, is ash, right? We crush it, we explode it, and that ash has to be dealt with. You got to clean out the fireplace once in a while. We don't know what to do with it. It's highly acidic. We've been burning coal for over a century, so we have tons of it. We're doing our best to keep it out of the groundwater. We don't always succeed. In North Carolina, they're paying $200 million a year to deal with coal ash. And of course, the power company just raises everybody's bills. They're not going to cut into their profits. So everybody pays a little higher bills because we're trying to figure out what to do with all this pollution. So anybody who opened a mine after 1977, they are now responsible for it. If they shut down, they have to make sure that everything is cleaned up, put back to normal and safe. Now, obviously that's very expensive. So the mining companies have to set aside money every year that they operate. That way they can't say, oh, sorry, we don't have any money left. Well, it's like an insurance policy. So the money is set aside the entire time that they work, and they're able to put the overburden back. That's what they took out. They put vegetation back in place. The law also banned mining in certain areas. If that land can be used for farming, they said you cannot mine here. They protected some parks and things. And then finally, you have to do something with all the pollution. I think this is a great solution down here. If we take an area that might be toxic from an old mine, you definitely don't want to build a neighborhood right there. Turn it into a commercial property, something where people can go a couple of times a year and not be exposed to high levels of toxins. So building a concert facility in an old abandoned mine area, I think is a fantastic idea. Remember, on the FRQs, they may ask you for a solution. How do you deal with a problem? Well, talk about building a concert venue on an old mine. Here's one last example of what reclamation looks like. And I think they did a pretty good job on this one. You see in A, it was a farmland and forest. You got a river running right by it. They came in, dug an open pit mine. These hills that you see on the left and right, that's the overburden. That's what they put on the side so they could put it back later. And when they were done mining, they did. They smoothed it all out. I assume they'd be replanting some trees and forest here. You see this little wetland area that was not really there before. That looks like the tailings, and so they turned it into wetland. So remember, one of the main functions of a wetland is that it's a natural filter. So as toxins eventually get back into the system, the wetland does a good job of cleaning all that up by itself. So pretty smart reclamation that took place there. All right, that's plenty for today, for sure. So Zoomers, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.